My Gramps was a paranormal debunker. He never wanted to be called an investigator. He always said,
"There's nothing to investigate, only to prove wrong."
he was never a believer, putting even Houdini to shame. For those of you who aren't aware, Houdini was quite the skeptic. He knew how to explain every bump in the night or strange shadow in photos. Gramps was called into hundreds, maybe even thousands of buildings, sites, and homes throughout his career. Some people were genuinely scared of their doors slamming and paintings falling, while others wanted to test his abilities. He was always able to prove the homeowners that the way their floors slope allowed for the doors to slam if the windows were open, or that their paintings were hung in just drywall, and eventually the nails would slip. Even the people who tried to fool him never succeeded. He found their hidden rooms or false floors, and in more modern times became quite the Photoshop expert. Whenever I became scared of a monster under the bed or in the closet, I would call Gramps and he would explain to me why I had no need to worry. He was my greatest comfort, and soon I was doing some work with him, keeping me occupied in high school. As a college student, it was great, as he was able to make it an internship for me and I got elective credits following him into homes and learning his craft. While I didn't intend to take over the family business or anything, I was very fond of the time I spent with him. He wouldn't take me on all of his trips though, as I had other obligations. There is one trip in particular I cannot decide whether I regret not being there or I'm glad that I missed. This is the one that I want to share with you. I didn't know about 19 Fort Wood Lane until after Gramps was there. I don't think I ever would have if he hadn't meticulously created written records for each of his jobs, and if this one hadn't been so well protected. I was cleaning out his rented office space last night, drowning myself in work to avoid my grief. About a week ago, Gramps had passed in a rather strange and sudden manner. A month ago, his doctor discovered a mass in his thyroid, cancer I guess, and it had begun to metastasize in both his brain and lungs. Usually, thyroid cancer can be caught early and is very treatable, so this came as a shock. However, even the best have their moments, and this was Gramps. He suffered for only a short while, passing a few weeks after the discovery. He chose not to treat it for what I assumed to be his honor and desire to go on his own terms. Now, though, I'm not too sure that's the case. He may have known treatment would be futile. As I said, I was cleaning out his office when I found the envelope. Unassuming and untitled, it sat in the bottom of the desk's top drawer, almost asking to be ignored. I think it was the lack of labeling that made me open it, though. Everything else was dated and titled, and this envelope lacked any of Gramps' normal detail. Inside, I found just a few pieces of lined paper, not unlike any of his other notes and files. However, this being separate, I knew it had to be important. In his classic slanted half-cursive handwriting, Gramps was describing one of his more recent cases. His notes were usually quick, more note-like than story-like, as typically he could just say, "Hearing voices, security camera mics were hacked," or "mice in the pipes causing the horrid screeching noises," along with quick descriptions of the events, but this was again different.
19 Fort Wood Lane. This house should be condemned and left to rot. Not a soul belongs here. It's the work of something that I've spent my whole life denying, but I can't deny this, not anymore. Many have faked it, but there's not a chance in heaven nor hell that this is some kind of fraud. I saw things here, things which I cannot explain. And this is the place that'll get me killed. I know it.
Immediately I was thrown off. This was very uncharacteristic. Gramps was never dramatic, and I had never heard of him speak of 19 Fort Wood Lane. The date was just over a month ago, so it had to be recent. I'd seen him so many times since then, and not once did he mention it.
Mrs. Penderson called me, reporting a strange figure roaming around at night. She tried to deal with it, but her husband was often away for business, and with a new baby, she had the right to be scared. I immediately thought it was an intruder and was determined to do what I could to help Mrs. Penderson, as I can only imagine what would happen to a young woman home alone at night. I arrived on Friday night, and she insisted that I stay with her and the baby. Her husband was across country on business, and this was confirmed by location services, credible testimonies, and photographs. I performed my usual checks, but not a false door nor loose window was to be found. We settled into the master bedroom for the night, baby asleep in her arms while Mrs. Penderson and I sat up waiting. It came every night, as she had told me, so it didn't take long for me to notice something. It started as a soft sound of footsteps up and down the hall outside the closed door, as if somebody were pacing. Not the sound of a man in boots, but rather a soft pitter-patter of a light-footed woman. Strange, as she told me it was a man in the house. After a while, the noise ceased, then started up again, this time coming from the master bathroom. Mrs. Penderson jumped, and I have to admit I was startled, since, as far as I was aware, this room was only accessible via a door in the room we were in. How could footfalls travel from the hall to the bathroom without passing us? "It's starting," she told me, and despite the dim light, I could see the fear in her eyes and the color drained from her face. I assured her I would catch the bastard. It was cruel to terrorize a woman like this. "Don't go in there," she said, this time with the tremble in her voice even the best actors couldn't fake. "I've never looked it dead on. I just know something bad will happen if you antagonize it. I called you here to prove that I'm not crazy, but I don't need you to get rid of it. I'll move. We can go. I just needed you to believe me. Please, let's go." I can't say she didn't warn me. "It'll be okay, miss, I promise. I just want to take a look. Whoever's in there can't hurt me and you won't have to move. Just let me scare him off." I headed towards the bathroom and flung open the door, reaching for the light switch. I flipped it, finding no light came on. I tried again, up and down. It wasn't working. I backed up into the bedroom and tried that switch. It worked fine. I hadn't seen this before. I had checked, and the breaker for the bath also controlled the bedroom. The bastard must have broken the bulb. Without a second thought, I walked into the room, taking a few steps forward before feeling a rush of air and hearing the door slam behind me. I could hear Mrs. Penderson screaming, and the baby began to cry. Normally, fearless in these situations, I was horrified to feel the goosebumps creeping up my spine and noticed a slight tremble in my hands. Taking a deep breath, I took another step, but was stopped immediately by a rough force. Stumbling backward, I looked around, trying to adjust to the dark. Moonlight was filtering in through the slim window above the shower tile, and I could make out the details of the room. However, standing in the bathtub was something that hadn't been there before. It was a detached tub, so it wouldn't be a shower curtain or anything, and there was no chandelier or artwork on that wall. The figure was in the shape of a man, but bigger than any man I'd ever seen. It stood probably 8 feet tall, but incredibly slim. It may have been even taller, as I made out what looked like a top hat adorning its head. My blood ran cold as I knew this was no trick. The thing began to step towards me, and I tried to scream as it reached for my throat. Nothing came out, and instead I felt the thing sink its hand into my skin. It was impossible, it had to be, but I could feel the weight of its hand sinking in and crushing my windpipe. I fought and struggled, but it did nothing. I only survived because it let me go, releasing its grip and slowly walking back to the tub before dissipating altogether. I stumbled through the door, back to Mrs. Penderson, grabbing her hand and telling her we had to go. I didn't look back, didn't bother with any belongings, I just knew we had to go. I had been warned, and I was not about to fuck with something so powerful. We ran out the door, and I helped her into my van before we drove off. I don't know what we encountered that night, but I do know it let me go on purpose. It wants to be known, wants me to tell people what happened that night. I spent my whole life trying to convince people it didn't exist, so it is only just that it gets to show me how very real it is. And it has killed me. The doctors might say it was cancer, but I was completely healthy before that night. When that thing reached for my throat, I think it infected my very being, planted some poison in my cells to make sure I would know exactly how powerful it is. The tumor in my neck has odd tendrils growing out of it, something the doctors had never seen before. I told them I had no idea what it could be, but I know it's the thing's handprint. The mass is exactly where I felt its horrible hand enter me. It left me alive just long enough to understand what it did, and for the fear to fester. But I refuse to speak of it to let my loved ones think they can stop it from killing me. Now all I can do is hide it from them, make sure no one ever goes back to that house and sees such hellspawn. If anyone reads this, know with my full intentions and honor that what I experienced that night was real, and believe me when I say, don't ever think that we are alone for a second in this world.
Greetings once again, Beast Boys and Ghoul Girls, Darian Black here. I just wanted to stop by real quick and say thanks for checking out my latest narration. I've always been a giant fan of ghost stories, and something about this particular one grabbed me, if you will. Please go over to Reddit and support the original author. He writes very, very cool stuff, ghost stories and the like. Also, if you have a moment, swing by your Instagram page and follow me at asta_la_pasta_YouTube. Until we meet again, I'll catch you next time, right here on Asta La Pasta.